In May 1989, John William Cooper went on Bullseye, a prime-time ITV programme watched by 17 million.
Nice to see you. You're from Milford Haven down there. It's a lovely part of the world. You've got an unusual hobby, John, haven't you?
He had murdered 2 people.
Oh, yes, the scuba diving.
The scuba diving. And apparently it's the place to do it down there, isn't it?
Oh, we've got the coastline.
Within 3 weeks of this filming, he'd murdered 2 more on that same coastline.
What was the motive? What could have happened? It must have been horrific. A complete madman could only have carried it out.
His appalling crimes cast a long, dark shadow over a peaceful rural community as he continued to live amongst them.
I think he came to a point where he actually believed that he was untouchable.
This is an account of a murder investigation spanning 25 years.
A vicious, cunning character who was very difficult to catch.
The cutting-edge forensic evidence that finally convicted a serial killer.
When you find the first bit of evidence, it's like turning on a light switch, and suddenly it's all illuminated.
And the victims he left behind.
How can you live with yourselves with what you've done to my parents?
All this has dominated so much of my life. I mean, I just want rid of this person. I just want my life back.
This is the peaceful, rural Pembrokeshire coast, West Wales.
This is an area of outstanding natural beauty. It is one of the safest places in the UK to live.
The aptly named Little Haven is a popular holiday destination and the perfect base to explore the coastline. But in 1989, it became the scene of a horrific crime. That June, Peter and Gwenda Dixon, a couple in their 50s, travelled here from Oxford.
He was a gentleman, Peter. He was a man who people would readily turn to, be they in trouble. He was a good role model when we were growing up. Both him and Gwenda were the kind of people you would want as friends, as neighbours. They liked the Pembrokeshire coastline, they liked the people. I think they went virtually every year there for as many years as I can remember.
See if we could see that little tower.
It'd be nice.
Yeah.
That's when it's money.
Yeah.
Their campsite bordered the scenic coastal path.
Were you there?
Yeah.
And on the last day of their holiday, they went for a walk.
The sun was shining and the weather was improving, and they spoke to a couple near to the tent to actually say to them, we are going for a last walk to let the tent dry. Unbeknown to them, it was the last time that they would walk the coastal path.
Around half a mile from the campsite, they entered a wooded area.
Right, you two, get down on the ground now. No. Get on the floor now. Now. I want your money. Hurry up.
Two days later, their son Tim reported them missing and police began to comb the area.
I was overlooking the coastal path now and the bay in front of me, puzzling now, thinking what on earth might have happened. And I hadn't been there 5 minutes when all of a sudden my 2 dog handlers shouted, "Don, boss, come quickly." I ran up the coastal path, some 300 yards, and there, down in a ravine on the right-hand side, was the most horrific scene that I've ever come across. The 2 bodies of Mr. and Mrs. Dixon, female lying here, male 6 foot away, tied up, shotgun wounds. Terrible, terrible sight. I must admit, I was really shocked to the roots.
Peter was tied up and they'd been robbed and shot in the face at point-blank range with a sawn-off shotgun.
I think as an investigator, what becomes quite clear is the amount of violence that the victims have had to suffer. And one of them must have been shot before the other, knowing that their fate was going to be the same. I can't believe what state of mind they must have been in just before the moment that they were actually murdered.
Pembrokeshire's largest ever murder inquiry was launched, sending shockwaves through the quiet rural community.
Holidaymakers have been warned to be on their guard while the hunt for the killer of Mr. and Mrs. Dixon continues.
One of those chance encounters that has an impact on you for the rest of your life. If it hadn't rained the night before, if it had gone north instead of south. But there's lots of ifs and buts in life, and the consequences of this if and but has lived with us for the last 22 years.
Please, if anyone has any information that might help, tell the police. And to the persons responsible, you can't be happy with yourselves. Why don't you just give yourselves up to the police? How can you live with yourselves with what you've done to my parents?
The killer had terrified Peter Dixon into giving him his PIN number, and he'd used it to withdraw £300 from cash points in the area.
What was the motive? For small amounts of money gained from stealing the credit cards, £300 or £400, it didn't make sense at all. And to be killed in cold blood.
He used sufficient violence to have killed him several times over. This wasn't just a robbery for gain, it was an act of a psychopath.
Witnesses provided a description of a suspect seen using the cash machine in Pembroke.
What we are appealing to the public for in relation to this individual is anyone who has seen him in the West Wales area during the past 3 weeks.
Police interviewed 6,000 people, but were no closer to catching the killer. One person questioned was a local farm labourer, John William Cooper.
Peter Dixon's wedding ring was missing from his body, and it was discovered that John William Cooper had actually sold a ring. And he provided an explanation that it was his wedding ring that was supported by his family. So at that stage, there was nothing else to suggest that he was actually a suspect or a person of interest.
What police didn't know is that Cooper had a history of violence. No one knows that better than his son, Andrew.
When I was 9, was the first time that my father got violent with me. I'd refused to wear a pair of shorts. He wouldn't treat me like a child. He would come at me frothing at the mouth. His eyes would be bulging. He'd expand himself, he'd clench his fists, and he would lay into me like I was made of rubber. He'd purposely bounce me off door frames and just throw me around like I was a doll. But to everyone else, when he was in the pub or out playing darts or social life, they were patting him on the back, good old Johnny.
No one suspected John Cooper of the murders, and after 18 months, the inquiry was scaled down.
To think that two people who came to an area that they loved to effectively to be tied up and executed, it really went beyond belief for those involved, and the shockwaves, carried on for many, many years.
One double murder in this countryside community was shocking. But 4 years earlier, less than 10 miles away from Little Haven, there'd been another. In December 1985, police were called to a house fire in Scoveston Park.
Well, what you had was a raging fire, howling winds, heavy rain, the worst scenario you could find.
Inside were the badly burnt bodies of Richard Thomas and his sister Helen. Richard had been shot in the head and stomach. Helen had been tied up and shot in the head.
Obviously, there had been a deliberate attempt to set the place on fire, to try and prevent any trace of who had carried out this horrible incident.
The motive seemed clear, a robbery gone wrong. Police believed the robber had targeted the house knowing Helen Thomas was home alone, but had been disturbed by Richard arriving and panicked.
The possibility was that the persons had been killed would have known who the perpetrator was. Why kill the two people?
Officers carried out standard house-to-house inquiries. Living less than a mile away from Scoveston Park, John William Cooper.
The whole of the family gave each other an alibi in the fact that they were in the house together at the time. So therefore, that alibi looked quite strong and cast iron at the time.
He said the police were coming around asking questions about this murder, and if you happen to see him, he said it so casually, if you happen to see him, just say we were all doing this. You know what they're like. They're just going to annoy us otherwise. And he walked away, and I thought nothing of it. All the clues were there, but I wasn't mature enough to put them together at the time. I mean, I was used to him saying something and me saying yes anyway. He didn't say no to him.
John Cooper had evaded capture twice. In 1996, he would strike again.
No. Get on the floor now! Hurry up!
To think that one individual was confident in controlling 5 people and then subjecting them to an absolutely horrific attack, it speaks volumes for that individual.
By the 90s, the Welsh county of Pembrokeshire had 4 horrific unsolved murders. In 1985, Helen and Richard Thomas were shot dead in their home and their house set on fire. In 1989, Peter and Gwenda Dixon were executed, also by shotgun, on a bright summer's day on the coastal path near Little Haven.
Any murder is violent, but these were particularly horrendous crimes. I think it shocked the community, and I think it shocked the police officers investigating, because it was so out of their experiences in dealing with crime within that area.
In March 1996, another violent crime left its mark on this quiet rural community. 5 local teenagers walking through fields in Milford Haven were subjected to a terrifying attack.
Just as it was starting to go dark, they were aware of a man or a figure walking towards them with a torch.
He was wearing a balaclava, dark clothing and holding a shotgun.
Get down on the floor now, this, I'll shoot you! No messing!
He terrorised these teenagers. He then went on to rape and sexually assault 2 females and later demand money from the rest of the group. He fired the shotgun in the air as a warning shot, so it must have been an absolutely terrifying experience for all of them.